So I'm in my early 20s, which means it's time for self-discovery and finding out who I am. And I'm having trouble. I don't necessarily believe in or practice astrology. However, I thought it might be a good way to dive into my personality type and relate to other Virgos in a way that explains why I am the way I am. So naturally, I read 5 books, all written by Virgo authors, to see what I can gather from that and what it means to be a Virgo, you know? Here are the books I've read, one of which is written by a man because I choose inclusivity and I stand with all Virgos. First up, I read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, then a horror, Carrie by Stephen King. For a cheesy YA romance, I listened to The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han, which I listened to on audiobook. The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake as the fantasy option. And lastly, as the non-fiction option, I listened to Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton as an audiobook. So I'll be looking into these books based on how the author approached them and what that says about them as a person. Every author has their own flavour, and I'm curious to see the running themes throughout the books and what that says about Virgos. Also, honourable mention because apparently George R.R. Martin is a Virgo, and I have read the first Game of Thrones book. Now, what does that tell me about the author? He likes to drag on and is horny. First up, we have Frankenstein, which I was excited to get into. I enjoyed the writing. I feel like Mary Shelley really wanted to cover all the bases. It's very multi-level and comes from lots of different perspectives, and I feel like a lesser author would struggle with biting off more than they can chew with that. Its characters, while themselves may not be Virgos, I feel like authors still put a little bit of themselves into their characters, right? So while Victor was dramatic and ambitious and a little gay, Adam, the monster, not a monster, is really introspective and is just a strong, soft, massive little abomination boy who I love. Next up, I read Carrie by Stephen King, who is the only man on this list, which sometimes was quite obvious. There was a bit of she boobed boobily writing, and I don't know, every now and then I would remember who's behind these graphic words about teenage girls, and I'd be like, whew. But I gotta hand it to him, I was really entertained. Once again, the story was very multifaceted. It had a really interesting structure. Just like Mary Shelley, he took a little bit of everything he wanted to cover, everything he could, like every perspective. And once again, it worked. Like Frankenstein, there was a lot of, who am I and how do I fit into this world? And being ostracized if you don't fit into this world. Then I listened to The Summer I Turned Pretty, which was the lowest rated of the bunch, which isn't Jenny's fault. I'm just really tough on romance because I'm sensitive to cringe. Jenny, like the last 2 authors, also tried to fit in multiple elements by jumping timelines, which sometimes took me out of the story. There was like a whole decade of summers smushed into this one book, which could be one of those bit off more than you can chew things. Or maybe I'm just being too harsh and I'm not the right fit for the book. It also had, like the other 2 books had, characters that were looking inward and trying to find out who they were and how they fit into this world, which is par for the course for a YA book on teenage self-discovery. Next up, the Atlas 6, which is the biggest of the heap. I was really excited for this one, and it has so much potential, but meh. It took me a while to get through, and it had such a cool base for the world building and each character, but I didn't connect to them at all. Once again, the author tried to jam everything in, every experience, every perspective, which is why each character is so focused in on, but at the same time, I don't even really think I care about these people. The world building I just didn't get into. I didn't find myself being like, oh, I want to be there. And I think it just needed more rules and lore around it, maybe. There was lots of details and ramblings about the science and technical things, but not so much the bigger picture. I think if there's one thing these authors all have in common, it's that they throw in as much detail as they can all at once because they think it's cool and they don't want to miss out on anything. But not all of them take a step back and go, was that needed? And lastly, I listened to Everything I Know About Love, which is a non-fiction where the main character was also the author, so I learned more about them than any other book. And boy, was I worried. I started the book being like, I do not like or relate to this person at all. They seem frantic and undependable and at times selfish. Then once she starts talking about her anxiety and talking to her therapist about her identity issues, I'm like, oh yeah, sisters. At the start, once again, lots of jumping around from timelines and structures. Like she'll start talking about a boyfriend she had when she was 19 and then she'll jump back to when she was 16 and then she'll include a random chapter that's an email or a recipe. And I was worried at first, I was pulling back a bit, but it starts to come together more so in the last half. What I connected with and what I noticed was most similar to the other books were her issues with identity and who she was in her core. And then she quoted my favorite page from The Bell Jar, and I was like, sold. She was like, I've molded myself into who I thought I should be from day to day, from situation to situation, from boyfriend to boyfriend, to the point where she doesn't even know who she really is. It's that thing where it's like, oh my god, I love your personality, I feel like we connect so well. And it's like, thank you, I designed it just for you on this very day. So those were the books I read, and according to only those books and what I related to in them, here's what I learned about what it means to be a Virgo. We drag on and we ramble. We want to do everything as to not miss out on anything. We want to be perfect while we do it, and we question everything, including who we are and why we are the way that we are. And we're a bit horny. This didn't really help any existential things I've got going on, but I hope it was everything you needed. So, bye!